Chloe worked as a senior registered nurse at one of Sydney's major public hospitals, regularly picking up brutal night shifts and exhausting overtime. She and her husband, Liam, had set themselves a massive goal saving up for a house deposit, which, in the absolute madness of the Sydney property market, felt like an impossible task. Chloe grew up in a dusty country town out in regional New South Wales, where endless droughts tested the local farmers year after year. From a young age, she watched her parents work themselves to the bone from dawn till dusk, desperately trying to keep their modest farm afloat. Her dad would often come inside with cracked, bleeding hands, but he always found the strength to smile and give his daughter a hug. Her mum taught her that nothing in life was more important than honesty, looking out for your mates, and having a roof over your head that no one could take away. When Chloe was 15, devastating bushfires came dangerously close to their property, wiping out their barn and half their crops. She would never forget that suffocating smell of smoke and the feeling of absolute helplessness as nature claimed what took decades to build. But it was right then, staring at the scorched earth, that Chloe swore to herself she would one day build an unbreakable fortress for her future family. She dreamed of a home where her kids would feel entirely safe, far away from any of life's storms. Driven by that dream, she packed up and moved to the massive, unfamiliar city of Sydney, renting a tiny room in the outer suburbs. She took on any casual job she could find to pay her way through nursing school, surviving on 4 hours of sleep a night and cheap 2-minute noodles. Nursing became more than just a paycheck. It was her true calling, a way of paying respect to the people who had once helped her family through the hard times. On the hospital wards, Chloe held the hands of dying patients, witnessed unimaginable grief, and thanked her lucky stars every day that she was alive and healthy. That tough school of life forged her into a woman of iron, but left her heart incredibly soft and open to love. When Liam walked into her life, he seemed like the solid, dependable bloke she could share her biggest dreams with. He courted her beautifully, said all the right things about family, and promised to be that brick wall she had always longed for. Chloe, who was so used to carrying the weight of the world on her own shoulders, felt a massive wave of relief finally letting her guard down and trusting a man. It felt like, after years of a lonely uphill battle, she had finally found her safe harbor. For the sake of their future, Chloe saved every single cent without a hint of regret, thrilled to watch their bank balance steadily climb. She could pull 3 night shifts in a row in the ICU and come home completely wrecked, yet totally happy. In her exhausted mind, she was already picturing a bright house with a wide veranda where their future kids would run around on the weekends. She imagined her and Liam hosting Sunday barbies for their mates, laughing and celebrating that the hard yards were finally behind them. Chloe's love was entirely selfless. She gave her all, expecting nothing in return but honesty and loyalty. Her down-to-earth country upbringing didn't leave any room for manipulation, hidden motives, or double standards. To her, family meant a sacred bond where 2 people stood back to back against the rest of the world. It was exactly this pure, innocent belief in the strength of their marriage that left her so devastatingly vulnerable to the disaster heading her way. Liam worked as a mid-level manager in a corporate office and had volunteered to personally manage their joint savings account to, as he put it, protect them from impulse spending. Chloe trusted her husband completely, obediently transferring the bulk of her hefty RN salary into their joint fund, sacrificing holidays and new clothes. The only real headache in their lives was Liam's mother Barbara, who loudly complained at every family get-together about her old, run-down house in the suburbs. Chloe tried her best to tune out the whining to keep the peace, completely unaware of what her mother-in-law's toxic obsession would ultimately cost them. Everything came crashing down one rainy Tuesday when Chloe's engine suddenly started smoking on her way to work, and her car died right in the middle of the M4 motorway. The torrential rain lashed against her windshield as she stared blankly at the thick white smoke pouring from under the hood. A towie who had pulled up behind her, a grumpy bloke in a high-vis rain jacket, tapped impatiently on her window. "Mate, I can tow you to the nearest mechanic, but I'm going to need $300 up front for the hookup." He grunted over the noise of the traffic and rain. "Yeah, absolutely. Just give me 1 minute. I need to call my husband," Chloe replied, her voice trembling from the cold. The tow and the emergency repairs required immediate payment, but Liam flat out refused to answer his phone, sending her straight to voicemail over and over again. "Hi, it's Liam. Leave a message." The cheerful automated voice chimed in her ear for the fifth time. Frantic, Chloe quickly typed out a text. "Liam, I'm stranded on the motorway. The car broke down. I urgently need money for a tow. Pick up the phone." The reply came back 5 agonizing minutes later. "I'm in a major meeting with the execs. Can't talk. Just put it on your credit card." "It's maxed out from the electricity bills and Rego, you know that?" She typed back fast, feeling the panic rising in her chest. "Transfer me some money from the house deposit. This is an emergency," she added in a second message. "Chloe, I've told you 100 times. We do not touch the house fund under any circumstances. Figure it out. I'm busy," flashed across her screen in cold, harsh text. That callous response was the final straw, forcing her to push her doubts aside and take matters into her own hands. "Excuse me, do you take online transfers?" she yelled out to the tow truck driver, mentally cursing her husband's stubbornness. Left with no other choice, Chloe was forced to download their banking app onto her phone and go through the painfully slow process of resetting the password so she could transfer the cash from their untouchable savings account. When the dashboard finally loaded, she froze, staring at the screen in pure disbelief. Instead of the $80,000 they had busted their guts saving for 3 years, the balance sat at a pathetic $400. She refreshed the page a few times, praying it was just a glitch in the app, but the brutal numbers refused to change. Scrolling through the transaction history, Chloe saw dozens of regular, massive transfers to an unknown account with the simple, vague description, "B Reno, $5,000, $10,000, then another $8,000. The money had been steadily bleeding out of their budget for the past 7 months. In that exact moment, a memory flashed in her mind. Her mother-in-law's recent, boastful Facebook posts about finally starting a little update on her old nest. Chloe suddenly remembered with crystal clarity their last family dinner, where Barbara had dramatically sighed over her plate. "Oh, Liam, my kitchen is just falling apart. The cupboard doors squeak, and the oven barely works," the mother-in-law had whined, dabbing her lips with a napkin. "A woman my age deserves to cook on a proper marble benchtop. Is that really too much to ask?" she added manipulatively, looking deep into her son's eyes. "Don't stress, Mum. You deserve the best. We'll figure something out." Liam had smiled back, patting his mother's hand. At the time, Chloe had brushed it off as standard polite son behavior, but now that exchange sounded like a straight-up confession. "Miss, so what's the deal with the payment? Are we going, or am I dropping your car back in the puddle?" The towie's gruff voice snapped her out of her shock. "We're going," she said numbly, staring at the empty bank account. And for the first time in years, she felt her blind devotion to her husband hardening into ice-cold hatred. Instead of calling Liam in tears and throwing a hysterical fit on the side of the highway, Chloe took a day of unpaid leave and asked the Uber driver to take her straight to Barbara's house in the suburbs. The rain outside the window mirrored her own internal state. Everything felt grey, freezing, and completely unforgiving. For the entire ride, she gripped her phone with sweaty palms, praying to any god that would listen that this was just some horrific banking error. Every mile they drove echoed with a dull ache in her chest, like someone was slowly twisting a knife directly into her heart. She thought about her sleepless nights in the ICU, her aching, swollen feet, and all the times she denied herself even a decent cup of coffee for the sake of their shared future. Were all those sacrifices, all her selfless dedication, just fuel for someone else's vanity? Her loving heart simply refused to believe that the man she shared a bed with could be such a twisted, calculated hypocrite. When the Uber pulled up to the familiar front fence, Chloe forced herself to take a deep breath to stop her whole body from shaking. Using the excuse that she had dropped by to deliver some fresh groceries as a surprise, Chloe walked around to the backyard and saw the absolute scale of the disaster with her own eyes. What she saw made her physically choke on a mix of outrage and betrayal. Her hard-earned, blood and sweat savings were literally cemented into this woman's backyard. Where the patchy old lawn used to be, there was now a massive, expensive merbau timber deck. A designer kitchen with premium marble benchtops was visible through brand-new bifold doors, and a crew of tradies were just finishing the tiling on a luxury plunge pool. Chloe stood under her umbrella, feeling hot, bitter tears of betrayal streaming down her cheeks. She remembered Barbara complaining about squeaky cupboard doors, and now A kitchen fit for the cover of a lifestyle magazine was gleaming right in front of her. Every single nail in that deck, every sparkling tile in that pool was paid for with her insomnia and blisters. Her ears were ringing as she realized just how incredibly blind and naive she had been this whole time. Her mother-in-law, wearing a pricey new cardigan, was floating around the yard, barking orders at the builders like a literal aristocrat. This woman was bathing in luxury without a single thought about whose lives were being destroyed to fund her comfort. While her mother-in-law was distracted by a phone call from the landscaper, Chloe slipped quietly into the house and took photos of the unpaid contractor invoices sitting on the kitchen island. Chloe's hands were shaking so violently that it took her smartphone camera a few seconds to focus on the glossy paper. She read the final totals on the invoices, and her vision went dark at the sheer scale of this family robbery. Under the Build To section, Liam's name was printed in black and white, and the bank details matched their joint account perfectly. It was absolute bulletproof evidence that her husband wasn't just a coward, he was a cold-blooded thief. Liam had looked her in the eyes for months, kissed her every morning, and systematically drained their dream fund. In that very moment, something incredibly important broke inside Chloe. Her forgiving, gentle nature evaporated without a trace. The heartbreaking pain was instantly replaced by the burning, concentrated rage of a woman deeply scorned. She no longer felt like a broken victim. She was now driven entirely by a cold, ruthless thirst for justice. Slipping out of the house completely unnoticed, she hopped into a return cab, feeling her soul cover over with a thick layer of ice. Returning home, Chloe didn't breathe a word about her discovery. But the very next day, she secretly met with a top-tier family lawyer, handing over every single bank statement she'd collected. She spent that night lying next to Liam, listening to his steady breathing and feeling nothing but sheer physical disgust for the man. He wrapped his arm around her in his sleep, completely unaware that he was holding a woman who had already signed his death warrant. Sitting in the lawyer's office, she kept her posture perfectly straight, without a single tear on her pale face. The legal expert flipped through the statements, absolutely stunned by her husband's audacity, while Chloe methodically laid out her ruthless demands. She decided she wasn't going to just slam the door and walk away. She was going to take back every single cent that rightfully belonged to her. Her plan was calculated, legally bulletproof, and aimed at totally dismantling this hypocritical family. Chloe was preparing to strike when they least expected it, making sure neither Liam nor Barbara would ever recover from the humiliation. The climax came on Sunday when Barbara hosted a massive family barbie to proudly show off her new renovations to all the extended relatives. It was a flawless, sunny afternoon. The smell of sizzling snags and steaks filled the air, and at least 30 people were gathered in the backyard. Liam was strutting between the guests with a smug grin, soaking up the glowing compliments from aunties and uncles about the luxurious new deck. Chloe sat quietly in the shade, gripping a glass of sparkling water, cold-bloodedly watching this carnival of vanity unfold. Every little giggle from her mother-in-law and every toast raised to Liam's success only cemented her belief that she was doing exactly the right thing. When Barbara tapped her fork against her crystal wine glass, the yard instantly went quiet, expecting a touching speech from the hostess. Standing by the edge of the sparkling pool with a glass of expensive Shiraz, her mother-in-law asked for silence and gave a teary-eyed toast to her most wonderful, caring, and generous son in the entire world. She dramatically wiped away a fake tear and started recounting how hard it had been living in those old, tired walls. If it wasn't for my beautiful boy, I would never have been able to afford this little slice of paradise, she sang falsely, gesturing to the shimmering water. Those words were the perfect cue for Chloe, and she stood up slowly, carrying herself with absolute regal dignity. The sharp click of her heels on the expensive new paving echoed loudly in the sudden, dead silence. In that moment, Chloe calmly walked to the center of the yard, pulled a heavy folder of divorce papers from her bag, and loudly, emphasizing every single word in front of the stunned guests, announced the exact dollar amount Liam had stolen from their family budget. Liam frowned, clearly baffled as to why his obedient wife had decided to interrupt his mother's moment in the spotlight. When she slammed the thick folder right down onto the glass patio table, a few guests let out terrified gasps. "Your wonderful son, did indeed pay for this paradise, Barbara, but he did it using my night shifts in the ICU. Her voice rang out so loud and icy that shivers went down the spines of everyone present. Chloe mercilessly read out the bank statements, listing off every stolen $1,000, while the color drained from Liam's face, leaving him ash grey. He tried to grab her arm and hissed through his teeth, begging her to stop embarrassing them, but Chloe pulled her hand away in pure disgust. Relatives began to whisper furiously amongst themselves, staring at the pale mother-in-law who dropped her expensive wine glass onto the new timber deck in pure shock. Chloe officially announced that her lawyers had already initiated a brutal property settlement process and filed a lawsuit for financial fraud, attaching every single receipt from this festival of vanity. She watched with total apathy as their fake reputation as the perfect family crumbled to dust. Now, Barbara would either have to urgently sell her luxuriously renovated house to pay back her daughter-in-law's stolen money or drown in endless court battles and public disgrace. Chloe loudly added that her mother-in-law now had exactly 30 days to put the mansion on the market. Otherwise, her lawyers would slap a caveat on the property. Not a single guest spoke up to defend them. They all just stared in shock at a pathetic, crushed Liam. Leaving her husband to turn pale with primal terror under the horrified and judgmental stares of his entire family, Chloe turned on her heel, held her head high, and walked out the front gates, cutting those pathetic people out of her life forever. Stepping out onto the street, she took a deep breath, feeling absolutely free and genuinely happy for the first time in a long time, ready to build a new life entirely on her own terms. If you loved this story of satisfying karma and brutal payback, make sure you hit that subscribe button, leave a like, and drop a comment down below, because we've got plenty more shocking true stories coming your way.